I'm really excited because I'm talking with someone I've known a long time, Billy Marovitz. That's a name that a lot of people remember. When I tell people I know this guy, they go, "You know Billy Marovitz?" I go, "Yeah, he's cool." Marovitz was president of the Marovitz Group. He's a Democrat. He was a Democratic state representative and state senator in Illinois, former committeeman in the state Democratic Party Central Committee, and the vice chairman of the Democratic Party for 25 years. How could you not know this person? He served in the Illinois House from 1974 until 1980 and the Illinois Senate from 1980 until 1993. He was the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, vice chairman of the Senate Public Health Committee. Today, he owns Carnival Restaurant at 702 West Fulton Market in Chicago. And it also has a restaurant in Paradise Island in the Bahamas, too, which I am looking forward to seeing the next time I go to the Bahamas. It's a beautiful place. But what was interesting was this past week, my guest Billy Marovitz hosted a book signing appearance with Maureen Dowd, the New York Times columnist. And she discussed her recently released book, Notorious, which features interviews with all these different people like Paul Newman, who I met once when I was at the Sun Times, Daniel Craig, and Elon Musk. Marovitz did an interview at the event at Carnival Restaurant with Maureen and the book signing. And Billy, thank you for joining us here on the Ray Hanania on Politics podcast.
So happy to be here, Ray. I've known you for such a long time, and you've done such great work for so many years. I'm honored that you asked me.
Oh, absolutely. You're a great guy. Listen, I could have gone on with your bio probably for about 30 minutes. You've done so much over the years. When you look back, what's the one thing that you really like to talk about that you're really proud of? What are the things that, I want to talk a little bit about your life first before we talk about Maureen and her book. But when you look back at your life, what's the things that you really feel proud of, things that you remember? Politics, I'm sure, is a major part of that.
Well, politics certainly is a major part. I think when I look back at my life, the first campaign that I won back in 1974, 75, when I ran for state representative and got no endorsements from anybody, but put a lot of friends together from high school, college, and law school, and we wound up winning by a landslide. That was a very big night. Uh, I think when I was in the Senate and I wrote and I passed the hate crimes law in Illinois. That was a huge thing. In the House, when I wrote and sponsored the generic drug law, so people could go to their pharmacist and get a generic substitute and save 50, 60% of the costs. I still get letters from people who thank me for that.
And
So the hate crime,
I'm gonna thank you now as a senior because I'll tell you what, that generic law has saved so much money, not
it
just for
does.
me, but every senior in the state of Illinois. That was phenomenal.
Ray, I could write a book about how the
You got
opposition,
to.
the well-funded opposition of big pharma, pharmaceutical companies, and the
Wow.
medical society and the pharmacists, they were all against me. A little freshman, they
Wow.
were all against me. But we put together a coalition of people from senior citizen organizations, consumer organizations, and the media, newspapers, stations, television stations that editorialized for this, and we beat the special interests. We beat the big money, and we got this generic drug law passed.
That's phenomenal. And there was something else you were going to tell me, and I'm sorry I interrupted. I had to go on the generic drug law because most of my followers, seniors, middle aged, that law is so important, and it's one of those laws that you almost take for granted. That's so significant. The cost of pharmaceutical drugs today would have been enormous had you not done that.
You know, Ray, I was at a campaign stop in Boys Town the other session, and I somebody came up to me and said, "Billy, I haven't talked to you for a long time, but I meant to thank you because one of my best friends was gay, and he had AIDS, and he was dying,
Uh,
and I came up to
Yikes.
you and asked you if you could put this particular drug on the on the list, the formulary, so we could get a reduced price. And I did it, and it saved his life, so he could get
Wow.
this drug. And,
Wow.
stuff like that is very touching to you.
Oh yeah. Well, you can do something to save someone's life. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. But
And when I,
and then go back. I was going to say, go back to 1974, for example. How old were you when you first ran?
I think I
And you
was
basically beat the machine, and then kind of helped take over and refocus it.
right. I was about 25, 26 years old,
Wow.
and
Wow.
got no endorsements from any newspaper, radio station. Um, but we were a very active, highly visible campaign at every bus stop, at every L station, at every shopping center, every weekend. So we were energized, and I went everywhere that I could, and people seemed to like what I was saying, and we wound up
Is,
winning by a landslide, which kind of surprised me, and I know it surprised a lot of other people.
is there a secret to winning an election? I mean, we have an election this week. We have elections every year practically. Is there a secret? I mean, when you look back at an election, is something that people need to do when they want to run for office, win or lose? There's got to be something, though, that is always part of a winner.
Well, you have to have a good message. You have to have a good messenger. And being a good messenger means you got to get to people. You can't hide yourself. Okay. One of Joe Biden did that in the past. You
Yeah.
can't hide
Yeah.
yourself. You got to be everywhere. Donald Trump was everywhere. You got to use the media.
Yeah.
Use the media as your friend. That's really important to get your message out and let people know that you're genuine, that you're real.
Yeah. And of course, you were going to say something else after I interrupted you about that generic drug law, which again I think is just phenomenal. And I'm glad we're doing this interview because that probably a lot of people either have forgotten or need to be reminded. Especially my age and that generation, that you were responsible for doing this great thing for us. What else? You were going to say a few other things, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but that
No,
was
that's
so
okay.
significant.
That's okay. I mean, I'm very proud of the hate crimes law that I wrote and sponsored.
Yes.
You see it every day. It's used
Yes.
every day. But I also, every single piece of gun control, gun advocacy legislation in all those years that I was there, I was the sponsor of. And I'm
Wow.
proud that I really took on the gun lobby during those 20 years that I was down there.
Do you ever miss being in the legislature because there's so many new issues that surface? And have you thought about something that you'd want to do if you were in the legislature today? What would be
Well,
the one thing you'd want to do if you were still there and could, put the legislation in and run it through? What would it be? Is there anything?
let me just tell you, change the question in a way. If
Okay.
when people ask you, what's the one thing that would change what's going on in politics, not
Yeah.
only in our state, but in our country? What would have the biggest effect? And I'll tell you the one thing that would have the biggest effect, okay? And that's changing the law where people can gerrymander districts. Okay, if every district was in the whole country
Yeah.
was configured the same way, the
Right.
right way, not who controlled the pen
Uh,
or controlled the state. That would it would make everything way more competitive, and people would have to get along and go along and work together in the states and in Congress.
I couldn't
Change,
agree with you more. That I've seen good people who may have been on the outs with the dominant party in the state redrawn out of influence simply because they divided their district into five different parts. And it happens to, and then they create these weird districts. They're just weird. If they would just box it, right? And whatever is there, and you represent that district. But, that hasn't been like that forever, right?
right, and it would make the biggest change. Just imagine if you had to be competitive every single time. Most of these races, when you're in elected official, either in the House or the Senate, they're non-competitive races. There's no big primary. There's
Right.
no challenge. If you had a challenge every time you were running, you would have to be more responsive to your
Right.
constituents.
Right. I think that is a probably an important principle of politics, being responsive to the people you represent instead of carving a district to represent people who already like you and just keeping them happy. That's unheard of. Have you thought about writing your book, Billy? Because those are interesting ideas.
Well, I guess I've thought about it. There's so much that I have to say. Ray, you asked me things I'm proud of. I'll go on with a few things. When I
Yes.
left when I left the Senate, I bought a lot of the land, and I didn't know anything about real estate development. I bought a lot of the land from the American Medical Association in what is now River North, and I put up
Wow.
60-story buildings all
Wow.
over River North. There were no high rises there. I put up 60-story buildings all over River North, and now look what River North has become. It's fantastic. When I started Carnival, um, in what is now the Fulton Market District, there were no buildings around there. It was a
Wow.
meatpacking district.
Right.
It was a meatpacking district. So we were the gateway to River North. Front, we were pioneers because there were no buildings around there. And now it's our 20th anniversary, and it's been wonderful to see. During the convention, Ray, that was in Chicago, on the closing night of the convention, I had 1,500 women for Kamala have a party, a fundraiser at Carnival. And the
Wow.
opening night of the convention, I had 750 pro-choice women
Wow.
at Carnival. So and a big fundraiser for Gabby Giffords, who's a friend of
Right.
mine, and she's wonderful on gun rights and gun violence.
And then I'm going to walk into this event you had, but are you involved in other things that you want to tell us about, or do
Yeah,
let's
there's
talk?
there's
Go
one other thing, Ray, that I'm very proud of. It's hard to believe, but I woke up one morning and I said, I want to produce a new musical. Now, what do I know about musicals? Nothing, nothing. But I,
That's
I
all
laid
right.
in bed, I
All
wrote
right.
everything out, and I got my team together in February of 2016. And I said, this musical is going to be about a family that owns a bar in Wrigleyville, and we're going to follow the family, the
Good.
grandfather, the grandmother, the kids. We're going to follow that family, the patrons in the bar, as the Cubs season unfolds, ups and
Right.
downs, highs and lows. Lo and behold, ho- lo and behold, the Cubs win the World Series that
Wow.
year,
I,
and my play called Miracle came out, got standing ovations every night, won the award as the best new musical in Chicago. And I think creatively, that's one of the things I'm most proud of.
and I'm sorry I didn't include that in the introduction. That's amazing. I always wanted to write something called "Everybody Loves Abdullah," a story of a Palestinian married to an Israeli trying to navigate through all this craziness that we have to go through, based on "Everybody Loves Raymond," a comedy like that. So who knows? One day it'll happen. Billy, that is that play still playing? By the way,
No, I
can
closed
people?
it. I closed it at the end of the baseball season, but we're thinking about maybe bringing it back for television for the
Nice.
10th anniversary of the World Series. And I've also thought about bringing it to Washington D.C. because the Washington Nationals won the World Series the year after the Cubs, and the same kind of story can be told
Right,
there.
right. That sounds phenomenal. I'm going to be looking forward to that. So now you own a restaurant, two restaurant, one restaurant Carnival, one in Chicago, one in Paradise Island. Tell us a little bit about why every man loves to cook, but usually we let our wives cook. But why get into the restaurant business? What made you want to do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I guess I owe it all to Richie Melman from of
Nice
Lettuce
guy.
Entertainment.
Oh God,
Yeah,
when I was at the Sun Times, he was
yeah,
phenomenal.
he's a great guy. He's one of my good friends, and he sort of got me involved by asking me to invest in a bunch of his restaurants, and so I did invest in a lot of restaurants with Rich. Joe Stone Crab in Chicago, in Las
Love it.
Vegas, and I actually moved to Washington D.C. to open Joe Stone Crabs in Washington D.C. and raised all the money from movers and shakers. RPM Italian, RPM Steak,
I
RPM
love that
Seafood.
place.
So I'm involved in a lot of restaurants with Rich, and then I got this opportunity to open a restaurant on my own, and it's been wonderful. I love to go. Last night I was at the restaurant, went to every table. There were
It's
anniversaries, there were
it's not
birthdays.
just
I bought
about
them
food,
dessert.
right?
Huh?
It's not just about food. It's about people, right? Meeting
That's right.
people and talking to people.
That's right. It's about people, and it's about making people happy, entertaining them, seeing them smile, celebrating their birthday, celebrating their anniversary, celebrating a graduation. And it gives me a lot of satisfaction. It's wonderful. And opening this new restaurant in the Bahamas on Paradise Island, that's been a wonderful creative process to make something happen out of gravel.
That's phenomenal. Tell it, what is Carnival? What type of restaurant is it? Just for the people who may not have heard. And that's again for everybody. It's 702 West Fulton Market. What kind of restaurant? What kind of food and atmosphere and ambience?
I would say the food is Latin fusion, Nueva Latino Latin fusion. It's a combination of Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, Cuba, Puerto Rico,
Thus,
Peru, Spain,
thus the
all of
name
that stuff.
Carnival.
Yeah,
Thus
that's
the
right.
name, right? Wow, that's
Exactly,
phenomenal.
exactly. And but more than that, from the moment you walk in to the moment you leave, it is entertainment. You are entertained not only by music, by energy, by dancers, by aerialists. I mean, we have a show called Copa Carnival, and we have aerial Copa. We have Cirque du Soleil aerialists up in the air, and if
Wow.
it's your birthday or anniversary, she'll pour you a glass of champagne from up in the air. It's
I
really
got
it's very cool.
Billy, I apologize. I meant to be there a couple times. The one day that we're going to talk about in a minute, I had a senior moment where I stepped on a rock, I fell over, and it wasn't like just falling. It felt like I fell 20 feet. I banged my wrist, I banged my knee, I banged my head. I'm going, oh my God, this is the first time I realized that I'm a senior citizen. But I'm doing really well now. I'm back on my feet, but I felt terrible because that night, that morning that this happened to me, that night, you had a really a renowned journalist, author, Maureen Dowd, who just released her new book, Notorious, right? And you interviewed her. You brought her to Carnival. I was one of the lucky people invited, and again, I just felt terrible not being there because I wanted to get her book autographed. Being a journalist, but you were able to do an interview. You were packed with people there. Tell us, first of all, about that event. Tell us a little bit about Maureen and the interview that you did with Maureen, which I think is interesting. Some people have a book signing and then they sign books and they move on. You actually did an interview with her that people could see and enjoy that adds depth to the whole experience.
It was a of course I had to read the book before so I could be prepared for that.
Yes,
Most of the people in the room had not read the book yet. They bought books that
right.
night. They got autographed books from Maureen, but they hadn't read the book. So I had to bring out the things that I thought people would like. At this event, it was amazing. We had a U.S. ambassador, we had a congressional leader, we had a former governor, we had several aldermen, we had wonderful newscasters, Carol Maureen and Mike Flannery. So we had a
Phenomenal.
pretty august crowd there. But I brought out the things. Maureen's famous for her acerbic wit and her aversion to power. And I brought out interviews like with Paul Newman and Robert Redford and Elon Musk. Her longest interview, her longest chapter was with Elon Musk, and
Really? Wow.
he talked a lot about
Very
AI.
timely.
Very timely.
Yeah.
But remember, these are older interviews. These are not current.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I said to her, what an interesting thing it would be, Maureen, if you could interview Elon Musk now.
Yeah.
Okay. And how different that interview would be if you could interview Elon Musk now. Interviews with Jane Fonda and Diane von Furstenberg and Larry
Wow.
David and
Wow.
Tina Fey. And she talked about Tina Fey and Sarah Palin and discussing that with her and with Lorne Michaels.
Oh my
It's
gosh.
it's a fascinating read, and about Paul Newman and how he didn't like being a sex symbol. When you interviewed him, he wore sunglasses. He covered up those beautiful blue eyes. Okay, as opposed to Robert Redford, who loved being a sex symbol, and and Newman had a difficult time having fun in life because of this sex symbol image. Redford, he loved it. He embraced it and had a lot of fun doing that. Diane Furstenberg, I don't know if your
Yeah, of
listeners heard about her, but she
course.
she was an incredible woman. She described herself um, as a sexy woman in a man's world, and she talked about the the experience. She was supposed to have a menage a trois with David Bowie and Mick
Oh,
Jagger.
okay, wow. All
How
right.
about this story? Okay, yes, I brought it all out. David Bowie and Mick Jagger. But when she saw the two of them undressed like shriveled raisins, she backed off and said she wouldn't do it. Okay,
Oh my
and then
God, that's
again,
so
she went to
funny.
talk about the weekend she had with
Uh,
Warren Beatty and Ryan O'Neal.
wow, Warren
So
Beatty,
there was a lot of great stuff that she talked
great
about
actors.
DC and what it's like in DC and how disappointed she is and how disappointed she is with Republicans who
Yeah.
in the past the opposing party would always come out and be willing to stand up. These Republicans, none of them are willing to stand up to Trump and speak
It's
truth to power.
and politics today seems to be more about name calling and bullying rather than issues because there was a time when Republicans, Democrats, they didn't have to agree on something, but they were civil about it. Today, it's like, it just really, it's kind of frightening.
Ray, I go back to when Ronald Reagan was president and Tip O'Neill was the Speaker of the House.
Right.
Ronald Reagan would invite Tip O'Neill on a regular basis over to the White House at 5 o'clock, 5:30, open up the bar, and the two of them would sit drinking, Reagan and O'Neill, having a ball, and also solving problems, coming up with compromises to solve problems.
Well,
That's the way things could get
yeah,
done and used to get done. No
yes.
more. There's too much hostility, too much anger. We're more
It seems
divided than we've ever been.
it seems like politics today is about the person rather than, as you point out, with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, it was about the issues and getting issues done. Today, it seems like it's all about, even when I covered City Hall, even at the height of the Verdoliak 29, I remember Verdoliak and Harold Washington when they would meet together, and that sometimes we'd be with them and they go, "Look, this is off the record," and they'd be laughing, they'd be joking, they'd be talking about issues, and they were actually cordial, even though outside of that room it got to be very tense. But you could sense that back then people were willing to talk with each other, if not in public, at least behind the scenes to get things done. That's a rough time.
Absolutely. Ray, it used to be in Congress, people would work together, commiserate together, socialize together. On the weekends, they'd stay there. They'd meet the other couple's wives, families, children. Okay, and so when they were on the floor, even if they disagreed with them, they
Right.
wouldn't do it in a disagreeable manner because they
Yeah.
knew them as people and as personalities. Same thing
Yeah.
in the legislature. Okay, it's all different now. It's all changed. People go home for the weekends. They don't even know if the people are married, if they have kids, nothing. There's no personal relationships.
Yeah. It's a shame. I wish we get back to those days when there was at least some respect, even if you had differing views. You're
That's
right.
right.
You don't have to be disagreeable. You can disagree, but without being disagreeable. Billy, first of all, I appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. Is anything else that you want to mention before we say thank you? I mean, about the restaurant, about your future, another play, about you've done everything.
Well, Ray, I woke up the other morning and the same thing happened. I wrote a play, and the only thing I don't know what I'm going to call it is I don't know if I'm going to call it My Way or Blue Eyes, and it's about Frank
Wow.
Sinatra.
Wow. Just gonna
It's
say.
about Frank Sinatra from Hoboken, New Jersey, with his Italian background and his Italian mother, all the way to the end, all the way through Rat Pack, his wives,
Wow.
his kids, Ava Gardner, From Here
Wow.
to Eternity, the Oscar, Las Vegas. And Ray, I actually got to spend a weekend with Sinatra, which was kind of an amazing thing. After in my first year of law school,
Wow.
after my first semester, I went down to Miami Beach for our break before the second semester started. And my uncle Abraham Lincoln Marovitz called me and said, "Billy, I know you're in Florida. Would you do me a favor? Would you go over to the Eden Rock Hotel It's my dear friend Joe E. Lewis, comedian Joe E. Lewis. It's his birthday. Would you take him out for his birthday? Because I can't be there. I said, absolutely, Uncle Abe. If it's important to you, I'll be happy to do it. I went over to the Eden Rock. Joe had a stroke and he was in a wheelchair. I took him in his
Uh,
wheelchair. I wheeled him down Collins Avenue over to the next hotel, which was the Fontainebleau. And we went into the Fontainebleau and the cocktail lounge there called the Poodle Lounge. And Joe and I are drinking there. Here's this young kid and Joe E. Lewis. I'm drinking and wish him a happy birthday. And I said to him, so Joe, I know you have another really good friend besides my uncle, and that's Frank Sinatra. Where's he today? How come he's not with you on your birthday? He said, oh, he's in New York. He's making this movie called The Detective. He's having problems with his wife Mia Farrow. I don't think they're gonna make it. Okay, so we have another
uh,
drink, and all of a sudden, Ray, the door to the Poodle Lounge opened up, and in walked Frank Sinatra to
wow,
celebrate Joe's birthday.
wow,
Sat
wow,
down with us. Rizzo was with him. We sat down and they talked
wow,
about all kind of stuff. We went out to dinner to an Italian restaurant, and I spent the whole weekend with them. It was
wow.
incredible.
And I can imagine a book filled with stories like that, Billy. My guest today, Billy Marovitz, president of the Marovitz Group. By the way, Billy, do you have a website where if people wanted to get more information or, to reach out, is there someplace they should go online?
The website for Carnival is Carnival with an E at the end, carnivalchicago.com. That's the website for
One
for for Carnival.
Carnival with E at the end, one word,
Right.
carnivalchicago.com.
Right, right.
All right, Mike. I want to thank Billy Marovitz, friend, a great guy. I've known him forever as a journalist covering Chicago politics. And as you can see, my intro didn't even come close. It was just the tip of the iceberg of all the things that Billy's done. Billy, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thanks, Ray. It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.